everyone. Sorry our last video got cut off a little bit, but what I was saying was that if you didn't realize what road agents were as we were reading on, hopefully you realized that what they were talking about, the road agents, were the thieves, right? The thieves on horseback who stopped the carriage to steal all their stuff. They're known as road agents, or sometimes once in this book they were called highwaymen. They were essentially, when you think about like cowboy robbers, that's who road agents were back in these times. Now we are going to read chapter 11 called Jamocha Jack. You know, I always like to show you the picture to see if that helps us understand. Well, I know who Jack is. I don't really know what Jamocha is, so maybe I'll find out. I see the word jam in there, but I don't think that's gonna help me much. We know that's one of our strategies to read words we don't know yet, right? Is to look for words that are inside of it that we do know and try to use that. But I don't think oka, O-K-A, is a suffix, which is when we add certain letters that give meaning to the end of words, right? We've been practicing our prefixes and our suffixes. I don't think oka, O-K-A, is a suffix, at least not to my knowledge. So I don't know if that strategy will help me this time, but hopefully I'll find out as I read, right? I see our stagecoach, so I assume we're just going to catch on to our story with the stagecoach still trying to get to Hangtown. Hopefully we don't run into more road agents. The stagecoach climbed as if it were part mountain goat. It lurched, it halted, it bucked, it leaped, and it clung. At times, there was a sheer drop to one side of the trail. Far below, the pine trees looked to Jack like sharp green lances waiting to skewer them if they slipped. He only looked once in a while. They were almost at the diggings, he told himself. He'd be telling himself that for days. But at last, the stagecoach arrived, bringing a cloud of summer dust all the way from Sacramento City. "Hangtown, gents," the driver snapped with a final crack of his whip. "Looks mighty quiet today. Don't see nobody standing under a pine limb with his boots off the ground." A dog greeted them at the end of the street and barked them all the way up to the Empire Hotel. The passengers got out. There was road dust in Jack's eyebrows, in his ears, and down his neck. Now that they had arrived, he had gold fever so bad that he didn't see how he could wait another 5 minutes to get a shovel in the ground. Hangtown. Everywhere he looked, there were men in jackboots and colored shirts. There wasn't a woman to be seen. This sounds familiar to what we know, right, from our research about the gold rush. This sounds familiar. I wonder if there's more information here that'll be similar to what we researched. So far, it makes me think that our author, Sid Fleischman, also did research on the gold rush. He didn't just write about what he thought it would be like. He researched it, and he's writing very similarly to the experiences they would have had there. So I like knowing that. I like knowing that this author used the same kind of research that we've been doing in class. It makes me feel a little bit more like a professional author myself. There wasn't a woman to be seen. The miners were coming and going, or standing and talking, or sitting and whittling. Blue freight wagons were being unloaded. Blindfolded mules were being loaded. The store shacks on both sides of the street were raised on wood pilings, like short legs, and looked as if they had just walked to town. Jack shouldered the shovel, and Praiseworthy shouldered the pick. On the roof of the stage, the driver was throwing down trunks and hand luggage. "What's the best hotel in town?" asked Praiseworthy. "The Empire," answered the driver. "What's the worst?" squinted Cut-Eye Higgins. "The Empire." Praiseworthy glanced at Jack. "Unless I miss my guess, there's only one hotel in town, the Empire." It was exactly 1 hour and 5 minutes before Jack saw the diggings. First, Praiseworthy registered at the hotel. They washed. Immediately, Praiseworthy wrote a letter to Dr. Buckbee, advising him that Cut-Eye Higgins was in Hangtown, but that the map had fallen onto the hands of a gang of highwaymen. "Can we go now?" said Jack, fidgeting. He had polished his horn spoon so much he could see his nose in it. Go where? The diggings. Oh, the diggings will still be there after lunch, Master Jack. Praiseworthy's patience was a marvel and an exasperation. They had come more than 15,000 miles, and now they had to stop to eat. Jack didn't care if they passed up eating for a week, a month even. He wondered if he could ever grow up to be as easygoing as Praiseworthy. Now, he said this word exasperation, and I don't think I really understand that word when I first read it. But then as I was reading and when I thought about what I was reading here, I noticed that Jack was doing that whole like, can we go now? Come on, that thing we do when we're really anxious to get somewhere, right? And I know that Praiseworthy is telling him to like, hold on and have patience. And I know when people tell me that, I get frustrated, right? I get frustrated and I get annoyed. And then he talks about like Praiseworthy's attitude, how he has this patience and how he's easygoing. And so I would assume that exasperation would be the opposite way, that it might be like frustrated and like really energetic, And so I'm trying to use the clues that are here in the story. And so I'm thinking exasperation, maybe Jack's frustrated and he has like no patience. And so that's what I'm thinking. And I think that kind of fits this scenario. So I think we nailed it there. But once they sat down in the hotel restaurant, Jack discovered he was so hungry that he ordered bear steak. The only other item on the menu was sow belly and beans. And Jack figured you had to be starving to order that. You and the boy want bread with your grub? Asked the waiter. He was a big fellow in floppy boots. Why not? Answered Praiseworthy. It's $1 a slice. The butler slowly arched an eyebrow. $2 with butter on it. Praiseworthy peered at Jack and then smiled. Hang the cost, sir. We're celebrating our arrival. Bread and butter, if you please. The bear steak was greasy and stringy, but something to write home about. Jack forced it down. After they left the restaurant, Praiseworthy bought a pair of buckskin pouches at the general merchandise store and emptied the gold dust out of his glove. The index finger was springing a leak. Jack liked the new leather smell of the pouch. He tucked it under his belt next to the horn spoon and was beginning to feel like a miner. Then, with tin wash basins under their arms and the pick and shovel across their shoulders, they set out for the diggings. The day was hot and sweaty. When they reached running water, they saw miners crouched everywhere along the banks. They were washing gold out of the dirt in everything from wooden bowls to frying pans. Anybody digging here? Asked Praiseworthy when they came to a bare spot. Sure is, came the answer. That's Buffalo John's claim. The butler and the boy moved on upstream. Here and there, miners were shoveling dirt into long wooden troughs set in running water to catch the flakes of gold. Ooh, that's a type of mining we saw, right? Where they had like the wooden boxes with the mesh. We saw that instead of using a pan. So that's a different kind of mining that they've mentioned. That might be something I want to write down to remember that so far we've learned about 2 different kinds of mining. Anybody digging here? Asked Praiseworthy. Yep, came the answer. That's Jimmy from town's claim. On and on they went, looking for a place to dig. They passed miners in blue shirts and red shirts and check shirts and some in no shirts at all. Picks assaulted the earth, and shovels flew. Weathered tents were staked to the hillside, and the smell of boiling coffee drifted through the air. After they had walked 1.5 miles, Jack began to think they would never find a patch of ground that wasn't spoken for. Suddenly, a pistol shot cracked the mountain air. Praiseworthy's wash basin rang like a bell and leaped from his arm and went clattering away. You there! A voice from behind bellowed. Praiseworthy turned. His eyes narrowed slowly. Are you talking to me, sir? Talking and shooting. What you doing with my washpan under your arm? Jack stared at the man. He had a thick, tangled beard, and his eyes were bent over under the weight of his slouch hat. His ears were bent over under the weight of his slouch hat. Needless to say, you're mistaken, Praiseworthy answered. Until this moment, I've had the good fortune never to set eyes on you or your washpan, sir. We don't take kindly to thievery in these parts, growled the miner, stepping forward. A man steals around here, we lop off his ears. That's miner's law. Do you have any laws against shooting at strangers? Nope. Jack couldn't imagine Praiseworthy with his ears locked off. He took a grip on the handle of the shovel as the miner came closer. His heart beat a little faster, and he waited for a signal from Praiseworthy. The miner belted his pistol and picked up the washpan. He crimped an eye and looked it over. It's mine, all right. You're either nearsighted or scoundrel, said Praiseworthy. Jack was ready to fight, if not for their lives, at least for Praiseworthy's ears. Just then, a flash of tin in the sunlight from a pile of wet rocks caught Jack's eye. He dropped the shovel and went for it. Is this your pan? Jack said. The miner's bushy eyebrows shot up like birds taking wing. It is at that, ain't it? Then he laughed as if the joke were on him. I'd forget my boots if I didn't have 'em on. Praiseworthy peered at the man. Apparently shooting at strangers by mistake didn't amount to anything in the diggings. The miner hardly gave it another thought. How about a cup of Jamocha? Jamocha? Said Praiseworthy. Coffee. I got a pot working on the fire. Where are you strangers from? Pitchpine Billy Pierce, they call me, and I'd be rightly pleased if you did the same. Shucks, look like I wore a hole plumb through your washpan. Good shooting, though, weren't it? Praiseworthy put his finger through the hole. The washpan was useless. Perfect shooting, sir. No hard feelings, said Pitchpine Billy. I can show you more ways to wash gold than skin a cat. Let's get the coffee. Put hair on the boy's chest. He your son? Jack looked up at Praiseworthy. My son, the butler started to explain, but the miner didn't have a long enough pause. Mississippi MacFinn has his 2 boys with him. I hear they just struck it rich over at Pottery Hill. And then there's the Peterman boy. He and his pa's trying their luck at Swellhead Diggings. What's your name, boy? Jack, you look powerful clean for a young'un. It don't seem natural somehow. Why, your ears shine like new minted gold pieces. Jack felt his face redden, and he glanced at Praiseworthy. I'm not going to wash for a week, he thought, or a month, or maybe even until we get back to Boston. There was an air of hospitality about the miner that pleased Praiseworthy, and he forgave him the hole in his gold pan. Sir, a cup of coffee would taste fine. Pitchpine Billy led them to his weathered canvas tent, pitched along the slope. The coffee pot was boiling merrily. He filled 3 tin cans. Black. Black as paint, it looked to Jack. He'd never tasted coffee in his life. Aunt Arabella would be furious. He looked at Praiseworthy, and Praiseworthy gave him a nod, as if to make up for having Jack wash his ears back at the hotel. The tin cans were so hot they felt as if they had just been forged. Jack sat on a rock to let the brew cool. Although Praiseworthy's coat and bowler hat had fallen by the wayside, he clung to the black umbrella as a last badge of his calling. A butler, mused Pitchpine Billy. He drank his coffee down, steam and all. You any relative to Hemp Butler over at Muletown? The name is Praiseworthy, not Butler, sir. The miner crimped an eye. You don't say. Well, he calls himself Butler, old Hemp does. Never knowed his name was Praiseworthy, but I always figured him for the shifty type. How about 10-Spot Butler over at Poker Flat? He you folks? There seemed to be no point in trying to make himself clear, and Praiseworthy let it go. So Praiseworthy told him that he was a butler, his job. But Pitchpine Billy thinks that Butler is his name because that's a common last name. And so he's listing people he knows with the last name of Butler, trying to see if Praiseworthy is related to him because he doesn't understand that Butler was his job because he probably has never seen a butler or heard of a butler. As we've heard through the pages of this book that most of the characters we have met didn't know what a butler was. And so he just doesn't get it, and Praiseworthy thinks it's not worth the time to try and correct him. So Pitchpine Billy thinks that Praiseworthy's related to all these guys whose last name is Butler, which is pretty funny to me. Tell me, Mr. Pierce, just call me Pitchpine Billy. How do we stake a claim? Easy. Find yourself a piece of real estate nobody's working and pound 4 pegs in the corners. Put tin cans on them so folks can see. Rags'll do. And you got yourself a legal claim. That's miner's law. As long as you work it at least 1 day a month, it stays yours. He laughed and stroked his beard. Of course, the other 30 days you gotta stand around shooting off squatters and claim jumpers. He refilled his tin can. Why, there are places along the river where the claims is only 4 foot square, and the boys is digging out a fortune, back to back. Jack finally picked up his tin can. The steam alone was like a dragon's breath. Now he was almost sorry Praiseworthy had given him a nod. At the first taste, the coffee bit his tongue. Drink up, Jack, Jamocha Jack, that's what we'll call you. A man ain't really accepted around here until he's won himself a nickname. Best coffee I ever tasted, Jack said hoarsely. Plenty more in the pot. I ground in a few acorns for flavor. Jack winced inwardly. Jamocha Jack, the name pleased him, but he wasn't sure he could win it. The coffee stung and burned and tasted poisonous. He forced down another mouthful. He was afraid the miner would take back the name if he didn't drain the can. He tried another swig, but it wouldn't go down. Praiseworthy, catching Jack's distress out of the corner of his eye, shifted his position. The tip of his umbrella jiggled Jack's elbow, and the tin can jumped. The coffee spilled. It's no account, said Pitchpine Billy. He lifted the pot and refilled Jack's can. We don't stand on table manners out here. Jack gulped and stared at the fresh, steaming black potion of coffee. He had to begin all over again. Praiseworthy gave him a compassionate glance. He considered it